You can go. We're good? Can you guys hear me okay? Oh my God, that's so much better in my voice. Oh, wow. How y'all doing today? Hi. I met most of you on the way in as I scanned you. Well, thank you very much for being here on day 3 for some of you, 2 for most. How many people have been 3 days? All right, did you go to the Giants? Not the Giants game, but the Giants stadium? Yeah, okay. No, they're in San Diego this week. Thank you all very much for being here. I really appreciate it. My name is Aaron Farley. I'm from Apttus, head of enablement and global productivity here. I'm probably going to ask, or Aaron might ask you, move you up front, but I'm going to let him decide on that. Anyway, I'm personally very honored to be able to introduce Aaron Kalo. I'm Aaron Farley, not the presenter. Aaron Kalo is the presenter, because Aaron and I have known each other for years. We've met years and years ago when he was in tech, and prior to him evolving or moving into this mindful space of realizing what opportunity there is to connect with people and share that experience with all of you. Obviously, you all have some sort of a connection with mindfulness or interest in it, right? It's not too often you go to a tech conference and get that, which is kind of cool, and that's what we try to do here. We've been doing this week is kind of mixing it up, and we did this last year as well, and we had a great session. So again, I appreciate you taking time to join us here. Anyway, I'm just gonna hand it off to Aaron Kalo and let you guys appreciate the day. But thank you very much for being here. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Small group. I say we all come up and get a little closer, more human. Do you guys mind coming up and maybe let's just make a little semicircle together? Is that all right? And I'll just sit down. And I'm not even sure if I need the mic, so we might give me a second. We'll figure if I need to turn it off. What's that? Yeah, okay. I'll leave the mic on, but maybe we don't have to put the audio on over top, right, to record, correct? There you go. You want to come over here and join us? Can you guys hear me okay when I talk like this? Yeah? I can put the mic back on if it's easier because of all the noise. How many people like to have the mic on? Okay, turn the mic on. We'll turn the mic on. I'm still going to sit down here if that's okay. Cool. I have to say I had this moment right here when I'm sitting with you guys. It happened to me 3 weeks ago where I was in Bogota, Colombia, and there were 1,500 businessmen and women there, and we're wondering, what is Aaron doing here? This is a conference about entrepreneurship and digital marketing, and I was there to talk about mindfulness. And I had that moment. I meditated right before I went on stage and just said, what is it that people need to hear here and now? And it was so much more useful than the presentation I had and the things I wanted to tell versus just wanting to talk. And so I think I'm going to do that with you guys again today. So in front of 1,500 people with very little Spanish in my vocabulary, I grabbed a stool, came down off the stage and just sat and talked to everybody. And it was really quite a great experience. And so I'm going to do the same with you guys and throw the presentation out the window and have more of a conversation if I can get your okay with that. Great. So I'll tell you just a tad bit of my story so you know where this is coming from. And then I really want to give you some thoughts about maybe where we can go and make this fairly interactive, because I find the best learning is shared learning, and that we all have experiences here that can help one another, and I'm happy to help facilitate that a little bit. First and foremost, I would guess I would be categorized in the normal categorization of things here in San Francisco as an entrepreneur. Started 4 companies, sold 3 of them, a couple technology companies, and so you know the drill, right? You know these guys, you know the talk at the bar, and you know what that sounds and feels like. So very A-driven personality type, and made my fair share of headway in the space. And probably like a lot of you, I ran into a moment where I just said, what's it all about? Anybody have that moment? Yeah, okay. Yeah, like what's it really all about? Is it about cranking it out one more day? Is it about productivity? Is it about making success? Is it about the relationship that I'm in? What, and just you get these moments. And so mine came after the 3rd company I sold, and just had a moment to pause and got back into my own Zen meditation and practice, and just got a little bit more in tune with myself, because I had lost myself for sure. There was no doubt. And I had been creating a lot of suffering for the people around me, and for my own well-being. And I believe that we do that all the time. And most of the reason for that, I concluded, was just the false narrative we have bought into in today's society. And I'll talk about that in a second. So that's my background. Like I understand and have come from places that I believe many of you sit in. And I'm not far out of it. I'm not sitting in a monastery anywhere, just kind of levitating in my meditation practice either. So far from that. And like most of my Buddhist monk friends would say, I'm making mistakes every day, just like you. So just another guy to talk to you about my journey and how that might help you guys. So that's little me. Let's talk more about what's worth talking about. Out of curiosity, how familiar are you guys with the mindfulness practice? How many people have like a meditation practice here? Anybody? One or two? Okay. How many people have like read a little bit about mindfulness? Anybody? Cool. How many would just say, I'm kind of curious and I'm here like, just want to know what the hell you're going to say, Aaron? Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. We're kind of all across the board. So let me level set for everybody, because if you looked around, you would have seen various levels of maybe understanding or practice. So for this conversation, I'm going to define mindfulness as moment-to-moment awareness without judgment. And let me break that down for you. Moment to moment, right? So that's really tapping into the kind of Eckhart Tolle power of now conversations, right? Like being here and present now. Most of us can relate to that as just like in conversation. It's like fully engaged, not thinking about something else, ruminating on something that just happened in the past, let alone doing a little bit of this, right? And pretending like we're multitasking, right? But being right here, right now, and the power of that, moment to moment. And then there's this thing called awareness. And I think that's where it gets really interesting. And this becomes sometimes a spiritual journey. This becomes just sometimes a me journey, or sometimes somewhere in between. But the awareness is to be able to see yourself outside of yourself, what we sometimes call the observer. Have you guys heard this term? The observer. So to be able to actually look down on your own thoughts and say, maybe with curiosity, it tends to be a good tool. That's interesting. I just felt that or thought that or did that, versus being so caught in that you're not even able to see. And so being able to be the observer, it's an interesting tool and a lifelong practice to do so. And then without judgment, right? Moment-to-moment awareness without judgment. And that's probably the hardest part, right? Because we're super judgmental. Unfortunately, we're harshest on ourselves. And this is where a lot of the suffering comes in, a lot of our friction comes in, a lot of our problems is the judgment layer. There's a lot of proverbs out there and modern day texts as well that will say that all suffering comes from one place, our judgment. If we would just let the thing happen as it happened, there is no problem, right? Kicked in the shin, ow, okay, it passes, we go. But then it's the thought about who kicked me, why did they kick me, what did I do, what's going on, what's wrong with my life, I didn't do that, and there we go. And we're creating the suffering in our mind as we go. But just the kick itself is nothing. It's just a small incident in life. So that's what I'm going to start with, okay? If that's a fair definition. I'm going to add two more pieces, and then I think we can start an interesting conversation. I struggle with defining it and started to put mindfulness into certain categories because as Wendy and I were talking, there's mindfulness from a Buddhist spiritual philosophy, which I think has its place, no doubt. And then there's mindfulness as this kind of modern day tool that's getting watered down to maybe even more kind of self-helpy type of things. And so the word itself is not what's important. It's what it means to you and how you use it at the place you are in your life. And so I broke it into three areas that helped me understand it and put it into a framework that was digestible in modern day world. The first of these three pillars is that word presence. How do you really cultivate this? How can you hold presence? If you manage a team or work with clients, you know that holding presence is one of the more difficult things to do, and to really do that in a way that makes them feel empowered and good. And I'm going to get to that in a moment, but I think the presence piece is one of the more commonly accepted and understood pieces of this pillar. The second is acceptance. And this gets to be where things go really wrong and get really hard. Because a lot of us who meditate or calm down a little bit, we start to feel a little bit more like, okay, I got control. And then all of a sudden we hit these roadblocks. Our brother says something to us, or a spouse does something that we can't stand. And all of these things start to spiral, even though we felt like we were kind of still. And so a big part of this acceptance phase or pillar is truly being okay with what is as it is. And so when something happens, it just happens. And that there's nothing more to that. And a little bit as the judgment piece. The other part is that we have our own challenges and our own struggles, and the more clearly we can face it. Most of our problems are avoidance pieces, like we do things to avoid those deep down hurts, and face it, and as we'd say, breathe into and look it straight in the eye, the quicker it dissolves and evaporates. So accepting we have challenges, facing those directly, and then letting the untangling of all these things that have happened or these ideas go. And so one really good example to help you with that is this concept of fixed thinking. Have you guys heard of the fixed thinking? I love it because it makes me think of my brother, and here I am passing judgment, right? But fixed thinking is when you just stick to one way of thought, whether it's this is how I'm going to live my life or this is what success means. A lot of times it's very minute, like political belief systems or arguments, like the same argument you have with your family members when you go home for Thanksgiving. You know what I'm talking about? This is fixed thinking in a way. It's lacking curiosity, it's lacking openness, and it's lacking this full acceptance of just letting things be versus sticking to one area and holding on to it, that grasping. Letting go is another good concept, like fully letting go. One of my favorite conversations when we do our circles together and open our hearts a little bit is to ask, what does it mean to really let go? It's a particularly interesting question. What does it mean to really let go of the concept, of the construct, of all these things we're holding on to? We're so heavy. We're holding on to so much. If we just let go, how interesting could that be? Even if it were just a philosophical thought. Okay, sorry, I digressed a little bit. Presence, acceptance, we got issues, we got to face them, and we just have to let go. And then compassion is the third. That's kind of the real action-oriented steps. So what you'll hear a lot of people who get into their mindfulness practice or meditation practice, those are sometimes used interchangeably, is they'll go through this, I'm so much more calm, and then they got to deal with some of this acceptance stuff, and it's like, it's getting all messy. And maybe they get through that, and then there becomes this place. A lot of folks that come out of monasteries, when they go away for a while and then come back, where they get in trouble is in the action. Like, how do they act in the world? How do they take this into the everyday world? And that's where compassion really comes into play. So being compassionate for yourself and for others. And there's a really big difference between compassion and what's commonly confused with, which is empathy, right? Empathy is when I say, so sorry, you fell, your knee's a little bloody. I hope you feel better. And your heart goes a little bit like that and you move on. Compassion is to go down, help that person, clean the knee off, give them the mental or physical support they need, and do something about it. That's the act of compassion. So a lot of times we feel like we're compassionate, but we're just showing temporary moments of empathy because we're animals. That's what we do naturally. And so we give ourselves a little too much credit sometimes for empathetic feelings. I feel for them, but how you're really doing things that sometimes are a big sacrifice to actually show compassion, especially to those people you don't really like too much. They need the most compassion. They really do. They really, really do. It also means you, too. If you have that feeling towards somebody else, there's something else that needs compassion within yourself. Moment-to-moment awareness without judgment, presence, acceptance, and then compassion. Make sense? I'm going to stop for a second and just take any questions or any comments at this point. Anybody have a thought, question, or something that just comes up for them as we talk about this? Yeah. Anybody find the judgment piece a particularly difficult exercise? Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that. Great. Yeah, it's easy for me to say. It's much harder to do in the world, no doubt. What else? Anything else come up when I say these words? Are you guys not fully present then? Are you ruminating about the emails you got to get to? Or yeah? Go ahead, Dan. A little bit. I love it. So the way, again, a lot of mindfulness is based on some of the ancient Buddhist teachings, although it's not about that in modern day world. And the way a lot of the Buddhists will say is there's a difference between judgment and discernment, right? Discernment would be like, okay, that guy looks like he has the potential to take my life. I think I'm going to go on the other side of the street. That's discernment, right? Judgment would be making up a story about that guy, how terrible they really are, how could they possibly live in this world, and won't they go get a job, right? So that would be the difference between judgment and discernment. But yeah, there's a lot of that, and fine lines and not always clear distinctions, for sure. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Other things that come up?
Like kind of determining that.
So how you get clarity on your judgment. Yeah, I got an exercise if you guys want to try it out. Yeah? Try a little exercise on this. It's called above the line, below the line, okay? And this is not something I made up. This has been taken and used by many people out there. That's all great ideas, right? None are really original. We're just different derivations at different times. So above the line, below the line is a great tool that I think can be used out there to really catch yourself. So when you're above the line, you're thinking about things like, wow, isn't that interesting? Or so curious that, well, that made me feel like, and you're kind of playing in this space of openness and curiosity and really more just trying to figure out what's going on. When you're below the line, your brain, or even the words you're saying when you're telling your friend like the story about what happened yesterday, like I can't believe she would even imagine that or what he did. And so we're starting to go in a place where we're saying words like, how could they do, or I can't believe, or things like that, okay? And if I were having my PowerPoint presentation, I'd have like a list of 50 phrases that are trigger words, and I can share that with you guys afterwards if you want. So let's do a little exercise. How about you guys just spend a minute, maybe 10 seconds with me right now, and I'm going to do it with you, and just think about what was the last situation or thing where you really felt like you were stuck. It was just like, oh man, like I don't know the solution. This keeps either coming up or this is a big thing. Come up with that. Give yourself a second, and then I'm going to show you how this exercise works. So I'm going to give us 10 seconds to come up with our most recent example. You got it in your head? Can you see the person or the thing or the inanimate object? It could be a dog or a cat, whatever. You got it in your head? You see, you feeling that, remembering that tension? It's important that you have this here current, or else this exercise does not work, because then we're just philosophizing in our brain, and it's not about that. So what I'd like you to do is find the person sitting closest to you and turn to them. And I'm going to have you guys do a 2-minute exercise on how to understand what's going on here. So can you guys just pair up real quick? I'm sure you guys can figure that out. Maybe introduce yourself. And yeah. Trust me, it's not too scary. Okay, so here we go. Before you guys get too far into what do you do and who are you and all that stuff that doesn't really matter, like your job and your company you work for. Yeah? Like these are the things we start with. This is how the exercise works. If I get everybody focused up here for 1 sec, this will go real easy. So the person with the shortest hair will go first. And your sole objective is to explain to the other person the situation that's in your mind and kind of where or why you're stuck, right? So I'm going to give you 90 seconds to do that, okay? The person who is listening, you only have one job, and this is part of the practice. Just listen. You are not allowed to say yes. You're not allowed to go, me too, sister. You're not allowed to give advice, solve for, any of that. You stillness and listen, okay? So person with shortest hair, begin your explanation, and I'll hold the timer. Remember, listener, stay listening. This is not a conversation. This is an exercise of listening. It's hard, I understand. Listeners should listen. And if you run out of time or things to say, just hold the silence. You can smile at each other. You can look at the floor if you're a little nervous. Just hold the silence for a little bit more. And if something else comes up for the talker, they can let it out again. They can silent, they can go back in. All right, we got about 10 more seconds. So talker, think about how to wrap up your where I'm stuck situation. And if you're done, that's fine. It's amazing how uncomfortable we get in silence, huh? The comfort of silence is something to cultivate, for sure. Okay, I'm going to stop you guys, come back in, kind of give that a thank you very much for listening to me and hearing my shit. Here we go, okay? Now, talker, guess what? Your turn to listen. Just listen. I'm going to give you 90 seconds. So now the other person's turn to share. Where are you stuck? What's going on? Okay? Ready? Go. What's really important if you guys couldn't hear, I'm sorry, what's your name? Andrea. Andrea is basically saying, a lot of times we're talking and the other person cuts us off because they kind of like, all right, I got it. And they want to give you a solution and so we so often forget that most of communication is not about the solving or looking for a solution. We just really want to be heard, right? We know that we're taught that in our close relationships, but all human beings want to be heard. And so for those of us that manage teams or even being managed, to find the space to be heard and let others be heard, it's a powerful way to get to know each other. You ever have that experience where you like meet somebody and you're like, wow, I feel like I've known you for my entire life? That's usually because they were a good listener. 9 times out of 10, because we just want to be heard, and what you do, it's amazing. I won't make you go through this now, but another interesting exercise is to hold the eye gaze for 60 seconds. Yeah, it's really hard. You feel like somebody's looking right into your soul. Because that's what's happening. We're connecting. Like we're just these animals with energy sources that we can do that. So let me bring that back to the initial question. How do I know who I am? So did you guys find when you were talking, if you reflect back, that the other person was saying things that felt like there was some judgment in there, or there was some like pushing their energy towards the situation? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like kind of the, like, so-and-so happened like this, or I have this problem. Did that come up at all? Yes, no, maybe? I need to come up with my words. There's these phrases that are great ones. I should bring out my PowerPoint. So the reason I say that is that when you have those situations and you hear yourself saying words that are talking about my problem, I can't believe, this was done to me, or this is the situation I can't find my way out of, you're starting from a place below the line. So it's really hard to get past the judgment and all these other things. So you really just catch yourself like, wow, oh wow, I'm way below the line. And again, I'll share some of these phrases with you guys if you want afterwards. And then if you flip it around and you start to say, maybe I'm curious about what's going on. I'm really trying to figure out the answer and how that may go. A whole other way to look at it. And so some of these key phrases just can really snap you out of your own judgment. And I'll share more with you. But hopefully the exercise was meaningful in the sense that you start to hear yourself talk. You actually start hearing some solutions through other people's problems. When people have similar problems to you, you go, oh, wow, yeah, me too. And then all your layers come down because it's just so clear because it's their own problem. So it's really great. OK, thank you for that. That was a good diversion for us. Presence, acceptance, and compassion. One of the challenges we have in the day is finding enough space to cultivate this, right? We're so busy that there just isn't time for anything else. Every day I feel like all of us say, I don't have enough time. Fair assessment? A lot of that going on in our head or telling everybody else. And so we know that not to be true for one reason is there's always time. It's just the choice of how you spend it. And so it gets to be an interesting conversation. And this is where we start going from these tools of the one I just gave you, or even teach you some meditation tricks you can kind of work into your day, to a little bit more of an exploration. We say, well, OK, if I'm always busy and I don't have time, what should come first, right? My email, my son or daughter, my boss, myself, my energy, what comes first? And most problems that happen today is that we have not made the decision of what our value system is. And it's just a priority system. If you want to keep it a little bit more real into the tact versus getting into anything that might feel even religious. But what are our values right here and now? Because most people, when you ask them what matters most in your life and what's most important, you'll get some standard responses of what kind of comes out of us, our kids and that. But when you go a little bit deeper, we struggle because we haven't spent the time now, not what our parents taught us or what we assume from our last mentor or whoever it is, but what is it now that's most important? And so when you can determine that, and that doesn't come like that, right? It takes a little time to drop down and get that clear. Then the question becomes, how are you living it intentionally? And so where we start to go when we find that we're too busy is that we're prioritizing without any sense of priority. And so we're only reacting to stimulus around us. And so we start getting lost and we start well, what am I doing here? And I'm getting pulled over here. And it drains the energy out of us because now we have no sense of centricity to hold us core to go into our day and our life. Our value systems, it would be argued, is by default in terms of what we see on TV, right? And what we hear through our friends. And now with social media, we combine all of that. A lot of us are getting caught in these cycles where we're just not being intentional. And so we default to places where we want to occupy our mind, not understand it. It's much easier to occupy your mind, which is why we go straight to here, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, than to let it just drop and explore itself. And so when we start getting some intentionality about what we're doing with our time, we find that we have plenty to do the things that are most important. So if we are to find these places and you start getting more intentional, like I want to be more present, or I'd like to be more compassionate, then the question becomes, well, how do we do this, right? It sounds nice, Aaron, but tell me how to get the hell out of this spot, right? And I'm not saying that I'm too much better. And the first place is just making time in our day to get still. And I find that to be the number one starting place, is stillness. And the great analogy I always love is the one that Meng, the famous teacher from Search Inside Yourself at Google, likes to say, is the agitated snow globe. You know what I'm talking about? Our brains are so agitated, so constantly, so many things coming at it, family, whatever, work, emails, texts, social, that it just doesn't give itself a chance to settle. And so how, as people, let alone leaders, can we get clarity if our mind is constantly agitated? And so how can we get more still? So one of the tactics to get still, as you guys may well know, is meditation. The word I'm not really fond of because it has all these connotations to it. It simply just means doing nothing, right? Like truly clearing your mind. That's all we're talking about here. Nothing special. And actually, that's what all the Zen monks will say. Life is nothing special. You are nothing special. It is just here and now. So were you guys okay if we maybe indulge in a 2-minute clearing of the mind, sometimes called meditation? I'll give you a couple of tricks in that might be helpful to get it. So there's 3 things to meditation that I think are important. If you have your own practice, feel free to engage or bear with me and try my own version. But the first is being grounded. So we need both feet on the floor. And you need to sit as upright as you can, that's comfortable, so your abdomen will be slightly engaged. And the reason we do this is that usually we're so tired, especially this time of day, that if we get a little bit more comfy, we're going to fall into sleep more than we are going to be stillness with a little bit of attention. The second thing is to make sure that you remove the judgment from your head. And so what that means is that when we're starting to go through the practice of not thinking about anything, guess what happens? You're going to start thinking about everything, right? And so it's okay. So it's okay for this not to go well because that's how it's supposed to go. So if we get a good posture, I tend to like having my hands like this. Some people like this. Some people just out. Wherever is comfortable, but have your feet on the ground, sitting up a little bit abdomen, and then we're just going to close our eyes. And as we do that, I'm going to hold us for 2 minutes. For some of you, that may seem like eternity. For others, we'll ask for another 20. And I'm going to just say a few things to see if that helps your brain clear it out. So let me get my 2 minutes started. And we're just going to close our eyes and sit silently for 2 minutes starting now. As you're sitting there, you may notice the noise and the talking in the background, and that's good. So allow yourself to just explore whatever it is that comes to your senses. As you also find your mind just to slowing ever so bit a pace down, a nice technique is to focus on your breath. The breath meditation is one of the easiest. And so one of the easier ways to do that is to think about your breath coming in through your stomach. So pulling it in through your stomach and then letting it out actually through your third eye or your forehead and pushing it out to the universe. So feel it come in your stomach physically and then push out to the universe. And if you just focus on the in and out for another minute, see how that might go. In through the stomach, out through the third eye. I'll end with one little phrase, and I can give this to you later. It helps me settle, and then we'll open our eyes after I'm done. And it goes like this. In, out. Deep, slow. Calm, ease. Present moment, wonderful moment. Smile, release. I so don't want to bring you guys out of your meditation. I feel like you should be sitting there for another 20 minutes. The peace on your faces is beautiful. Whenever you're ready, just come back and we'll continue our conversation. Feel better? Yeah, you feel the relaxation go down? Anybody feel worse? Not that I want to admit to you, Aaron, right? It's really interesting what 2 minutes can do. 2 minutes, right? Just a little bit of that drop. One technique that we use in my previous workplace was before any meeting with more than 3 people, we started with 2 minutes of mindful silence. Pretty powerful, right? 2 minutes, everybody's got the 2. And at first there's a lot of pushback, like, what are you talking about? What is this stuff we're doing? And then there was I don't know if I can hold still for 2 minutes. And before you knew it, guess what? Everybody came on time because they wanted the 2 minutes. And sometimes we forget, like I rush into it, and they go, whoa, Aaron, no, that's not the bargain. We want our 2 minutes, right? And these were usually the people that were the most freaked out about the 2 minutes because they were very high strung and anxious. So it's a nice tactic. And it can really help set the mood because a lot of times we come into our meetings, having run companies, days of one call, one meeting to the next, like, whoa, man, I can never really show up in just one. I kind of was bringing all this garbage, like, what's his name in the Peanuts? Linus, right? You remember with with the dirt coming, like, that's what we're doing. You think that, right? We're running into our meetings with all this dirt and whirlwind behind us because we're still thinking about that. And so giving ourselves a chance to stop, gain some presence, and then re-enter where we are. I also share a couple more tips along those lines. One of them would be to actually not go to the meeting and be a little bit late. A lot of people feel that timeliness is very important, and I understand why that is. But I would literally walk by the meeting room and text the meeting owner and saying, I will be there in 5 minutes, I'm so sorry. And I would take a walk around the block, a mindful walk. One of the best kinds are looking up at 45-degree angle. Have you ever done that? Like, it's a whole new world out there. Like, holy cow, people live up there. There's birds, and it's just something about it. It just opens your mind. And so even if it's a 5-minute walk, 3 blocks around, really helps. And then I come into the meeting, and they had now 55 minutes of 100% of me versus 60 minutes of maybe 50%, right? It was good. Lots of other things there. Typically, meditation people like to do in the morning when they have some time. If you're just starting out, I would recommend just 5 minutes, sitting still, listening to your breath. Sometimes guided meditations like Headspace are a good way to start, but not the end goal. And then it evolves. Sometimes walking meditations in the morning people like, and natural environments, so on and so forth. But it really does help calm us as people. And as you saw, it probably was useful right now. Okay. I'm going to move on to a couple other topics that I think are just worth exploring in this space. One of it is the concept of suffering. Anybody suffering right now? You all are suffering right now. Let me remind you, yes, right? We all are suffering. So let me re-ask, does anybody have problems where it causes a little bit of anxiety or stress on any given day? Okay, we're suffering, right? We're suffering. So the question is, well, what's the root of our suffering, and then how do we solve for that? And it's a good question. Majority of the time, our suffering comes from those things we talked about before, which is the thoughts on top of the situation, right? It's us layering what does this mean about me? Can't believe that they would do this, and it's called rumination or looking into the future. So if we were just able to stay present with the situation or whatever is happening right here, we wouldn't allow our mind to go into these places that serve us no good, right? We get caught in like all the past, and then we start thinking about, well, what does it mean in the future? And it doesn't really help us. Getting right here and now is what helps us, and really staying in that moment. Because it's in that moment you find clarity. By staying there and being still. Many times it's not even thinking about the subject at hand. It's just letting yourself be still. And then clarity comes, and then a peace comes, and you move forward. Now, if that's a little bit of insight on the root, and there's entire books written about it, so I can't pretend like we just cover the subject in 10 seconds. But if that's the start, then what's the solution to these things? And many of us get stressed, and I'll use one example to help us, is in our decisions. Right? We get caught in our decisions. I shouldn't have said that, or what do I do next, or how do I handle this situation, right? Decisions are a big thing, and it really causes us anxiety because it can be anywhere from something in our life, like whether we stick with a significant other or not because it's not going so well and we stick it out, or it's something in work where we got to do something about this relationship when we got to tackle it and head on, but how do I do that? And what I found the most useful tool to get clarity around that is remembering that everything comes down to one choice. And I really, really would enjoy for you guys to test this theory. But your choice always becomes very simple when you look at it through the lens of love or fear. Am I doing this out of love, or am I doing this out of fear? Seems so simple. And yet when you get to the core of it, it's one or the other. It's not both. Because remember, this is a decision, right? This is an action. And so if you can ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or fear? You'll get a lot more clarity on when you're falling below that line we talked about or above the line. And things get really easy. And so when you find yourself in the fearful place, we got to examine that, right? We got to spend more time. We got to own that a little bit more and understand what that fear is. Because sometimes, and most times, it's not the fear on the exterior, like they might be able to come back to me and get me fired. That's part of it. There's something more deep inside that needs exploration. And I'm not here to be the psychotherapist to tell you what that is. But that really means you got to explore the core of that fear. And that's where a lot of our decisions and bad ones come from. So love versus fear. It's a really helpful tool as we go through this process. Because when we make that decision based on love, and I know that's such a amorphous and sometimes foofy word, you're talking to Mr. A personality that didn't use that word a lot in the day. And you can use whatever euphemism you want. When it comes from that place, let's just call it positive energy for more baseline for everybody, things usually work out pretty easily, right? Because we can only see only so far in front of us. And yet, if you start looking at things a little bit longer term mindset, right, versus what's just that immediate threat, you realize that river of life, it's a long one, and it bends and it turns, and like every river, if you ever look down from like a plane at big tributaries, I remember I had this when I was going into Houston, none of the rivers were straight, right? They are all curved, some backwards, and then came back around. And so we don't really know what our river is supposed to bend like, and when we go backwards, whether that actually really is backwards. And so coming back to this thing of suffering, it's actually our suffering that gives us the greatest opportunity to find our path, because it causes us to really take a second look at what we're doing and why we're doing it, and gives us the opportunities to learn. So if I were to pull that all together, it's the embracing of the suffering that allows us to get clarity on love over fear and flow with the river wherever it's supposed to take us. Now that might have got a little deep and a little heady for you guys, so I apologize if that feels that way, but that's where it comes down to. And as like we said before, it's not easy because we are so wrapped up in what's going on. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to invite some conversation here. I've also come to believe, with a lot of other people in this greater mindfulness and consciousness movement, and would love to explore that conversation with you guys, that it is the pre-notions or conceptions we've had that have got us here. For example, what is success, right? Or as I like to say, what is success without peace? If you have no peace, is that really success? And what are the notions we're going for? What are we striving to do, and why have we bought into our existing value set? So if we can really start to think about the things we've been given, right? And we've been given a pretty interesting set of values, right? The Puritanic work ethic in the United States, work hard, get results. Even this like Silicon Valley, work hard, play hard. I mean, seriously, that's what it's all about. Work hard, play hard. Like burn the candle on both ends until you're friggin' fried, until you know no better. And so we kind of buy into this, right? We kind of shake our head, we pat each other on the back, and it's okay. I mean, I've said those words myself and done plenty of damage on both sides. And so what are the notions that we're accepting to be true that maybe aren't? And are we willing to explore those and go a little bit deeper to get to some places that might feel more at ease and more comfortable versus just pinging around? So I want to stop for a second. I gave you a lot to digest, and just come back to you guys. I'm curious, when you think about mindfulness in your everyday work, like what comes up for you? What goes in your head? What's happening right now? And remember, we're all here, fellow human beings, suffering without any judgment to go through. Just curious, what's on your mind as you think about this? Go ahead.
When I was sharing with Samir here, was that kind of... Oh, cool. Okay. What I was sharing with Samir before when we were talking about the kind of thing that kind of brought up that tension was actually the kind of situation at work that got me into Headspace, and this was in the past year. So everything that you said has resonated just, absolutely. I take those walks, look up, like everything you've said is, you can probably see, and what I notice is I'll find myself getting kind of caught into, like, I'll get an email and I'm like, okay, I gotta immediately respond, but maybe I don't. Maybe if I take a second, I take a deep breath and I kind of step back, my response will be better. And I've learned through experience that is 100% the truth, that it's not, and I've been able to kind of draw myself back out of things that cause me anxiety and realizing why they do, and it's made me so much more efficient and able to kind of put down the things and let, like, the things that aren't immediately, in my present thing that I need to be working on. I have multiple screens, but I've closed applications now that I don't need, because I've realized that those take away from the thing that I'm working on. And so everything that you've said has just been 100% resonated for me, so I can attribute to it being a useful mindset to have.
Love that. Couple of things came up for me that if I can use what's your name? Bryce. Great, nice to meet you, Bryce. One is the false notion of multitasking. You guys understand that science has proven this is not true. You can't actually multitask. You can only do one thing at a time, really quick. And the amount of energy you have to expend against that is like exponentially more than if you did it in one task at a time. And it's a great reminder, all these notifications, all this stuff, I gotta close it down. But more importantly, what I think is interesting when I hear you talk is that single breath. You're only one breath away from getting clarity, right? Like that email, you're about to respond to because you just want to get it off you. You don't want that weight of it on you, so you want to push it back to somebody else. And we just took our hands down and took one. Okay, no, I'm not. I'll respond later. Or maybe we write that email to ourselves and read it in the morning, which I like to do. It's very helpful, especially when you're late at night. We're one breath away from really making good decisions, so thank you for that. It's really nice. Other things you guys want to share that come up? Isn't it interesting how shy we are on sharing? Yeah. I just have so much. Yeah, there's just not enough time to do it. It's interesting. Go ahead. Sure.
I just think in this moment that everything that you've talked about is something that I consistently strive for, as far as living in the present, but always find myself going backwards or forwards. And then also trying to figure out where my value lies, what is important, because I'm consistently trying to do all things for all people and constantly trying to find that space, that 2 minutes to myself to say what's really important. And so it's interesting, this whole trip for me has been a lot about what you've been talking about, where it starts with spending time with my brother, who is very similar to you and does some of this stuff, him and his wife, to the handwriting person who told me I need to start letting go of things, to just being here. So it's just eye-opening for me that all these opportunities and I don't even know why the emotion is there, but all these opportunities are telling me I need to stop doing what I'm doing and do something different. So thank you.
You're welcome. I love it. Yeah, the suffering is so great. We're forced to do something different. Forced to do something different. How lucky you are to have that.
Yeah.
Right?
Just all like come together in 5 days. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it is. And we have those moments, and they're great moments, and we capture it so beautiful.
Sorry, people.
No, not at all. Not at all. Other people want to share?
So, hi, my name is Rajiv, and I'm even I could relate completely to what you said earlier about multitasking and doing too many things. And I was exactly the person whom people used to say, "Take it easy, man. You're doing too many things." I had my hands all over too many things, and I used to enjoy it. It used to give me thrill.
Adrenaline goes, yeah.
I enjoy it
that's exactly,
non-stop,
yeah.
going on and on and doing one thing after another, doing one thing after another, never sitting idle and things like that. And I thought that's what life is all about. But then at one point, and I was enjoying it, so I thought it could never have any side effects. But then I got migraine. I used to have these headaches, and I was like, I'm enjoying it. Why am I even suffering this? And the doctor said, there's no medicine for it. You just need to take it easy. You need to learn to take it easy. And I was trying to find an answer. What does it even mean? I mean, because I'm not so used to sitting idle, and I was always busy doing one thing after another. But then finally I got the answer that, just sit and breathe. Don't do anything.
No, nothing,
and
right.
it was the most difficult thing for me, but eventually I picked up on it and it helped me. And so I completely, thanks again for sharing all the beautiful things you said. I think I can completely relate to it.
I
So
love
just
it.
wanted to share that.
Thank you. It's a great share. It reminds me of the sayings of be more, do less. Yeah? Pretty simple and easy one to embrace. Hard to do, for sure.
Hello, everyone. Pretty much for me, this is totally different of what I actually do here. I was actually invited by my sister to come over here. So out of the whole, I would say, just day and a half, I was expecting that I was going to learn something to improve myself. But I'd like to say throughout this whole sessions that I've been for 2 days, applying through what he did, I've done that before. Getting those type of moments where, it hits me really hard. To my wife, who's like the same ways, to tell me, calm down, because I had so much turmoil. I'm not sure how to say it in different ways, but like I always have the family get involved with my work, type involved with friends, type involved. So I have so many things, and then just the way you explained to me, I don't know, it's like I said, there were so much opportunities, but now it just somewhat hits me. Like the way he I'm not sure if it's just resonating what he says, but it's just something like, I'm not sure if it's the mind connecting or it's just the way he said it, but it just kind of takes me a step back. Like a lot of people say, just take a step back. So I know everyone has their own problems or their own, what they say, their internal conflict. But I just like to share that, what he says is, pretty powerful. Probably not outside, but just inside. It just hits me really hard. It's sometimes I like to cry, but not really, because you're a man, you can't cry. But yeah, thank you. But thank you so much. There's so much people that I want you to meet, but sometimes opportunity doesn't hit. But I just hope that what you teach us, I can teach them. Not perfectly in what you say, but to understand that this is pretty much really important to what is now.
Thank you. Yeah, and I love that. It's the concept of finding your voice when you find that stillness, and then help others find theirs.
Yeah.
It's a really nice way.
Because that's ultimately. Sometimes I always feel like I'm the oldest in the family, so I'm kind of like I want to be the hero to kind of voice that opinion and not say. That's why I say about clarity of judgment, because sometimes is that what I'm saying is truly what is supposed to be or not really? So
Yeah.
I get to overthink,
Yeah.
and I start stressing to the point where, like, why am I thinking?
Yeah,
And
because you're thinking about your thinking. And
Exactly,
then you're
correct,
like,
yes.
Then you're the horses run wild, right? You're going around and
Exactly,
around.
yes.
So one thought for you, and then I know I have to wrap up in a second here, is So a lot of times when people think about mindfulness, they confuse it with self-help, power, positive thinking. And there's plenty of places for positive thinking, no doubt. We need more of it, all sorts of ways. But to remember that mindfulness is about no thinking, not changing the way you think, but getting to a place without thought. And so it's never perfect, that's hard to hold. But that's the difference, that's the stillness. And that's really what we're talking about, and that becomes the shift that we're talking about that gets us, because when we keep trying to change the thinking, it just becomes another derivation of our previous thinking, and it's not, the core hasn't changed. So everything you said was beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. We could do this for a long period of time, right? You can imagine why, like when we do workshops all day, the day goes by fast, and the weekend. I do want to mention, because I'm looking at this beautiful screen you guys see up there, and I'm in the midst of a little bit of my own crunch right now. We have a big event called Conscious Leadership Forum, and it's in this new Mindful Retreat Center in Santa Cruz. And I'm dealing with my own stuff too. Like, we're really in an interesting spot now, and if anybody has ever thrown events or know how it goes, it gets to be rough, because there's a ticking time bomb behind you, and that none of us are perfect, and we just come in and then we pull ourselves back out. And I find myself like that before I walked in this room right now. I do want to invite two last things here. One is I want to be able to connect with you guys. So I want to be able to give you my contact information to make it easy, because I have a 8-year-old son who's waiting for me, and I have to walk right out of this room to go catch him before it's too late. So if you guys want, I'll give you my email address, because I'd love to connect with you, and happy to do it on all the social media outlets too, Facebook, LinkedIn. But email I will respond to, and it's simply my first name, Aaron, Aaron, and then the @conscious, mag, mag.com. Aaron at consciouscomag.com. And if you look me up on the speaker thing, you can see my name and find me on LinkedIn and Facebook too. So I believe if we pull this all together, what we're talking about here is to find our own peace, equanimity, and what we'll call happiness. It comes down to two things. It's our own stillness, which is the awareness, the presence, the acceptance, and then being compassionate, but our own stillness. And then the other thing we haven't talked about, and I'll just end on here, is community and connection and belonging. There's a lot of research now. In fact, they found the most healthy communities in the world, the single common factor is not diet, not whether they smoke or not, but it's their sense of belonging, kind of that tribalism within us. And so I believe we made one mistake I'd like to correct now, and then we'll say adieu, is that we don't greet each other properly as human beings. We say hello, we give a handshake, maybe that little bro hug sometimes, or a high five, or a kiss on the cheek. Many cultures, especially in Colombia, a fake kiss on the cheek. So maybe for the last 30 seconds here, I'd like to see if we can't try something different, and see if we can't say hello with just a simple embrace of a hug. And so I'm going to hug as many people as I can, and I encourage you to do the same, and we can leave this room on a smiling note with me saying no more. So we're going to hug for 30 seconds and say goodbye. John, nice to meet you.